Hello, this is a presentation on motivating healthy relationship behavior. My name is Rachel Loevy, and this is for the motivation course. I have a slight cold, so my voice is a little weird in this recording, but I hope that doesn't distract from the content. Enjoy! So the main person or persons of interest with this kind of motivational interviewing program would be middle school bullies. For a bit of context, I am a domestic violence youth and children advocate. So I work with children who have been exposed to domestic violence, and this also incorporates outreach programs in schools for domestic violence prevention to teach healthy relationships to younger students. And this includes middle school students. So this is a slight deviation from my current position, given that normally we work almost exclusively with victims. However, when it comes to children, the blurriness between victim and bully and the acceptance of the fact that we need to help both, since both are adolescents and both need assistance, is more allowed than in comparison to any attempts for my organization to try to help offenders who are adults. Regardless, I do think the ability to reach out and try to help a bully still fits within my current position, and is just a different potential outreach avenue that we can take to try to encourage more healthy relationships in our schools with our young kids, especially those who are experiencing bullying behavior or specifically those who are engaging in it. Now, for me as the advocate, a couple of my primary goals going into these kind of conversations is to find out who's modeling the behavior for this person, for this student. Oftentimes kids are copying behavior that they're seeing. So are they experiencing abuse or have they been bullied? That's going to be a big question as an advocate. Additionally, determining the safety of the adolescents is important. And then I'm coming from the standpoint of wanting to help motivate the teen to engage in healthy relationship behaviors so that we have better outcomes in the long run for the student. So why is this kind of motivational interviewing and talking with teen bullies so important? Well, it relates to what bullying means long-term for the individual who's bullying, for their victims, and then for the community at large. So we have evidence, empirical evidence, to support the claims that bullying is a potential warning sign for child abuse or neglect in the bully's home. So this relates to my previous statement of we need to make sure that the bully is safe. Oftentimes kids are modeling behavior. So if they are modeling abusive behavior or bullying behavior at school, they might be experiencing it somewhere else in their lives. So it's essential that we determine the safety of the child. Additionally, bullying in middle school often leads to teen dating violence in high school, and then interpersonal violence or domestic violence in adulthood, because you're practicing having relationships this entire time. And if you're practicing unhealthy relationship behaviors or abusive relationship behaviors when it comes to bullying, this can lead to problems later down the line. Just for definition's sake, bullying is related to unhealthy and harmful behavior that's occurring within a school setting oftentimes. And we're talking the use of the term bullying with children and adolescents. You can discuss it with adults later on in the workplace, but that's usually referred to as harassment. And then abuse is usually adults. An adult is present or is involved in the situation, and it's a domestic situation, so it's in the home, not necessarily at school. Again, there's a little bit of crossover between the two because they actually are somewhat interchangeable concepts, and they both relate to trying to have power and control over another person. But that's why we're using these terms and how bullying is related to later domestic violence. So all of this relates to domestic violence prevention work, which is the core of my research and my work. Now, bullies and victims are also at an increased likelihood for being involved with the criminal courts in their lifetime. And this is for both bullies and victims, unfortunately. The percentages range from about 11% to 25% more likely to be incarcerated at some point in their lives for bullies and for victims. And I think this relates quite closely to the being exposed to unhealthy relationship behaviors and then either normalizing it in their lives and accepting that it's something that they're always going to face, or engaging in it with other people and aggressing against other people can happen as well. A great example of how a victim can get incarcerated when we're talking adults is in a domestic violence situation, oftentimes there's reactionary violence. And what that means is that, let's say there's a couple and one of the two individuals has been constantly abusing the other person. When that other person gets fed up, they might aggress back as a response, and they might hit or scratch or do something that leaves a physical mark that the original aggressor will then call the cops for and say, hey, my partner is abusing me. You need to arrest them. And this is why it can happen, unfortunately, quite regularly, where the person who's the regular victim, the person who is usually being victimized, ends up getting incarcerated first. So this is those difficult relationship type situations. And this is how bullies and victims are both at an increased risk, because they're constantly being exposed to unhealthy relationships, and they may either be engaging in them by acting them out or accepting that they're natural parts of their life that are just going to be consistently happening. So ultimately, bullying has long-term consequences for the whole community, for those who are being bullied, for those who are doing the bullying, for the families involved, and for everybody else who is also having to respond to these situations. And this is why it's so important to have conversations with middle schoolers, our young kids, to try to encourage healthy relationship behaviors that they can start practicing so that we're not seeing these negative long-term outcomes. All right, so given this kind of scenario where I've got a middle school bully in front of me, there's going to be these four-step approach: engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning for the motivational interviewing. The first goal is to connect with the student. The likelihood is that this student is being assigned to me because they've bullied somebody in school, the school has become aware of this, and I'm called in as a youth and children's advocate to work with the bully. I'd like to preface that this does not mean that somebody isn't currently also working with the victim. But this is under the assumption that the victim is being taken care of by another advocate, and we are dedicating a second advocate to make sure that somebody is taking care of the bully as well. So the first job that I have is engaging the bully, this adolescent, mainly by not referring to them as the bully in my own head. They are a child who needs help, and I need to establish that this is a judgment-free zone for support and emotional validation, not action-based validation. So what I mean by this is informing them that I'm not here to judge them or their actions. I am here to offer support and also offer emotional validation in that their emotions of frustration or anger are valid. Not necessarily the actions that followed those emotions. However, I'm here to listen and encourage and support, and really making sure that it's clear that I'm not there to punish or to place judgment upon the youth. Once a healthy relationship is established between me, the advocate, and the student so that they're able to engage, the next part will be the focusing element, which is determining our goals and the order. A couple examples of possible goals would be getting to a safe place. This is if we have issues with regards to the safety for this adolescent. Forming friendships or forming new friendships if the current friendships are unhealthy friendships that are leading to more aggressive behavior. And then potentially reconciliation or reparation. I have a little star with this one because reconciliation with your victim is a delicate situation. I think it's very essential that we understand, or that I explain, that it is not the victim's responsibility to, quote, get over the situation, or they must forgive, or they must be a part of fixing the relationship with the bully. They've been victimized. So they're allowed to say, I don't want a relationship with a bully ever again, keep them away from me. That is a valid response on the victim's side. But I can see a bully wanting, over time, once they learn healthy relationship behaviors, to potentially want to fix that relationship, especially since oftentimes our bullies can be friends. And you can have a friendship that's already established where there's this unhealthy bullying aspect that's been following it, that's reached a climax at this explosive moment. And maybe the kid who's been bullying wants to fix the relationship. That's a valid goal. However, we also still need to remember that the victim has the right to not want to engage in the relationship anymore. So that's why there's a star, because that one's a little difficult for a goal. For my paper, I'm probably going to be talking about forming friendships or forming new friendships because that's a pretty good middle ground goal that kind of sticks away from these other two complex goals, such as getting to a safe place, because that has to do with child protective services and all that stuff, or reconciliation and reparation, which involves a lot of the victim's choice, which is also quite difficult. So anyways, after we've focused on a goal or goals in the order that we want to follow them, the next step is evoking, which is encouraging adolescents to come up with ideas for why they chose these goals and how to possibly accomplish them. So when we're talking with our friendships, it would be why and how to start building these new friendships, why it's important to, why they might want to step away from some of their other unhealthy relationships with friends at school, and how they can start building new ones as well. And then that's where we kind of go into the planning period once we've established the why. And by we, I mean the adolescents. Once the adolescent has decided why they want to, then we can go into the planning of how, really, discussions of the viable actions that the adolescent can take to start making these changes. So for making friends, who, when, and where can we start building these friendships? And coming up with those plans is really the best way, I think, to start engaging and practicing healthy relationship behaviors. To wrap up, I have two main discussion questions and one kind of broad one. The first one is, does this make sense? And that's just in relation to the fact that I am a domestic violence advocate and I deal with this stuff all the time. And sometimes I can say things that I have very much established as a fact in my mind that might not have been clear when I'm explaining it to somebody else. So did any part of this presentation not make sense to you? Or was it something that you resisted and you were like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that? Please let me know, because I can sometimes miss where other people are not following my train of thought. So if there's any part that didn't make sense, please let me know. But the general two questions I would like to ask are, what are other goals that you can imagine an adolescent might have? So like I said, my goals had to do with safety, forming friendships, and potential reconciliation or apology. Is there another goal that you can imagine an adolescent having when they're trying to form better, healthy relationship behaviors? And then my second question is, what else do you think I might need in my plan of approach that might currently be missing? So that has to relate to the last slide with engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. Do you see something missing? And so, what is it? Please let me know. Thank you again for watching this presentation. I look forward to your comments. These are the references relating to the slide on why discussing bullying and ending bullying and having a motivational interview session with a bully is so important.